know what I'm doing. Like I'm one of these people who is able to move between different applications and things.
Yeah, you're multitasking.
Well, multitasking I think is an overrated concept. Uh, I think we were
Talked about
tricked with
that.
that one.
Yes, we talked about that. Okay, so
Right.
we are legit live now.
I see it. I see the L in the corner.
Cool. All right. So, hey, y'all. Hey, it's
Hey,
me,
hi.
the Lux Libra, and Purple Hair and Converse. And we are here with another episode of Chat with the AunTeas. We are continuing our discussion on self respect. We are continuing to look at how we show up in the world. And we are really looking at these external interactions, looking at, how our self-respect allows us to show up. And as always, we got our tea and we're ready to hear about your response to our journal prompts from last week. So I'm excited to dig in on this topic this week. And I know, Malika, you're excited too. So you want to go ahead and say hello to the people?
Well, first, what are you sipping?
I am, first and second of all, I am sipping on what I usually reserve for my night tea, but I didn't drink it all last night. So I am sipping on some lavender Earl Grey. It is one of my favorite teas. I love it. And so I'm enjoying that with some local honey. And I'm enjoying it in this awesome mug that I absolutely love. It is a mama and baby yoga mug.
Oh,
And yes, I absolutely love it. And it's so inspiring to me. And so I'm just like super happy. Great drinks and great mugs, like two of our favorite things together. So that's
right.
what I'm sipping on. And of course, my good old H2O.
High quality H2O.
High quality H2O.
So, as you guys can see, I am taxi service right now. So I am headed back to the house from doing all of the pickups and drop-offs and exchanges that happen in the afternoon. So I'm not sipping anything right now, but I have all of my stuff at home prepared because I'll be ready. So, hey y'all, hey again, Malika Salam, Purple Hair and Converse, your hope dealer, pushing positivity consistently. Why? Because hope is dope. So, when I do get home, I will be sipping a chai latte, actually cold, because I mixed it all up and put it in the refrigerator so that it would be ready. I was prepared today. I was prepared.
I love it. I was just doing a little experiment right quick. Yes, I love it. Whatever you did after you started talking, your sound got a lot clearer. So that was great. Don't change anything.
Oh, don't change anything. Okay, because I was getting ready to change stuff.
Don't change anything. Your sound is perfect right now. Stay right where
you are. Good deal.
Okay. So we got a couple of things going on. So one, of course, we made our transition now to Make You Media. So if you're watching this in the replay or if you're on now, obviously we're on the Make You Media YouTube channel and we've now integrated all of that. So we're on Make You Media on Instagram and on Facebook, and our website will be coming soon. So we're super excited about that. We are, of course, still Purple Hair and Converse and the Lux Libra doing our own things on social media in our own spaces. So hopefully you've had a chance to check both of those spaces out as well as the Make You Media space. And lastly, I just want to reiterate our journal prompt because we had such a great journal prompt last week. And that was, what self-respect practices are you engaging in? And what do you need to add to that? So for me, I got really clear on what I need to add to my self-respect practices over this last week. And it was kind of surprising for me. It was some things I didn't expect. It was some realizations that I had about my past. But it was also a lot of clarity on things that I have learned to do that I'm now integrating into a part of my self-care and self-respect practices. So I shared part of that on my Instagram page, which was the branded graphic that said, asking for what you need is a form of self-care. And I can speak, especially since in the last couple of weeks, we talked about choice and what choices we have. And then we talked about how we show up. For me, my realization was I need to do more asking. I'm pretty good at being clear on my needs. But of course, just like anyone else, I have blind spots. I have areas that I could use improvement in. And I need to ask for what I need in those areas. I need to ask for support. Sometimes I need to ask for feedback. Sometimes I need to ask for guidance and direction. I definitely had a lot of practice over the last week asking for clarity. So I've gotten a lot out of this journal prompt, and I hope our viewers did too. So how did that prompt work for you?
That prompt is one that I'm still working through. Self-respect for me has definitely been very eye-opening. Like, I just can't think of a time where I thought about that concept before we started discussing it, right? Like, not on my own. It was always external, like other, again, the thing we talked about before, respectability politics, my family saying respect yourself and what respect looked like, and then the expectations that were set, and really not thinking about what the expectations were that I had of myself. So so of course, since Auntie Riri has passed, there's been lots of people who have been, sharing Aretha Franklin everything. And I think probably one of the biggest songs, the one that everybody tends to go to, is Respect. And so I started really thinking about that. And this may seem weird, but like, that's been my meditation, because the lyric is RESPECT, find out what it means to me. And it's like, wow, no, but really, what does it mean to me? Like, we have an idea of what boundary setting looks like for other people. And again, a lot of times this work starts with us looking outside and seeing what's not working externally in those relationships. And what that has taught me is that it's really a reflection of what's not working internally. I can't give somebody else or do for somebody else what I haven't been willing to give or do for myself. And so that's really where I am with this prompt. Like, what do I need to give myself? Well, I need to give myself healthy boundaries. And what that looks like for me, and I've talked about this before, one of the wonderful things that I've discovered in Florida, St. Pete specifically, because St. Pete has always been a big retirement community, right? A lot of people retired to Florida, and like, they're like in St. Pete and they're living their best lives. And I watch these older people, and I'm just constantly reminded that I don't want to spend my next 40 years working hard so that I can then get a break from it. Like, I want to have this balance where I have some leisure in my life and some enjoyment in my life, and I'm not killing myself. So one of the things that I've given to myself that I'm reflecting on now, that I didn't even consider as self-respect, because that wasn't really a part of that conversation initially, is really, just paying attention and setting healthy boundaries for myself, that I don't have to do everything in one day, that even when my mind is telling me that I have to do something to be productive, if my body is telling me that I need to rest, then that is a boundary that I need to hold for myself, because that's what I would do with somebody else. If somebody else was saying, well, Malika, I want you to do this, and my body was saying, we don't have the capacity to do that, like, we don't have the spoons for that, I would honor that. I would honor myself, over making a commitment to somebody else. But I don't always do that with myself. And so I think that's what is probably in the forefront for me. What does respecting myself look like? And that looks like, what do healthy boundaries, setting healthy boundaries with me, for me, look like?
Yeah, I hear you on that. And definitely, I thought it was very interesting that we got into that topic, which, again, everything we talk about is organic. We don't sit out and plan, this month we're going to talk about this, next month we're going to talk about that. We don't do that. Like, it really is a chat with the aunties. It really is getting your favorite tea and going over your auntie's house and sitting at the table and having grown lady talk. Like, it's not girl talk, it's grown lady talk. So it just, that was something that came up for me that I really realized needed deeper exploration. So having been the global and spiritual, ancestral, and community reinforcement through the passing of Aretha really reinforced it. It was just like, absolutely, you are absolutely on time. You're absolutely on point. You're absolutely on topic. You are absolutely in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. So it, again, like I said, it came up organically for me as I was reflecting on how I have recovered from past traumas and how I have begun to redefine how I want my relationships to work and redefine how I want to show up in the world. And that, includes a variety of trauma, right? That includes community trauma, work trauma, family trauma, all of that. And so, so getting to the self-respect, I now realize was just a natural progression. But also, I think it's so important that we talked about it because, again, everything is about self-care. It is about Jesus and baths. It's about, get your crystals and get grounded and take a bath with your crystals and then do your nails with some crystal-infused nail polish and do a face mask. And
with crystals. And light the candles with the crystals and drink your water out of the crystal-infused bottle.
Right. So everything is about this. All of the language around self-care is about the physical body and this external object because, yes, crystals are our friends. They are gifts from the earth, but they are still external objects. And that we could utilize these external objects to get some level of serenity, some level of empowerment, some level of internal strength. But the ability to utilize all of that is a direct result of self-respect.
Right.
The willingness.
And let me just say this, it's super important to point this out and we keep coming back to this. For me in my coaching practice, the wellness wheel is really the centerpiece for me. It's always the thing that I refer back to. So great, physically you are working on those things. You've come to a point where you're like, I'm ready to do this work and this is what I have access to. This is where I'm starting at, right? With the self-care that is dealing with the physical body. But that's just one aspect. That's just one aspect. There are 6 other components in your life that you really have to attend to in order to have that whole healing, that whole self-care piece.
Yeah. And so that's, I was just going to read kind of what we came up with last week in our graphic. And it was for internal fortitude, self-love should be radical. Self-care should be practiced in all 7 areas, and self-respect in all external interactions. And so again, the idea of self-respect coming out of healing, self-respect is a part of healing, because oftentimes we get traumatized because we don't set boundaries, or we don't know how to set boundaries, or we're fearful that setting a boundary is going to cause some other negative chain reaction. And then also there is the part of the way that self-respect has historically been used as a shaming tactic in our community. Like you said, respectability politics, and, oh, she doesn't respect herself, she's doing this, or she doesn't respect herself, she's doing that. But we really have never been given a concrete opportunity to practice self-respect defined for ourselves, as far as how we interact with the world, which now makes me think about the Audre Lorde quote: if we don't define ourselves for ourselves and by ourselves, then other people will do that. Other people will feel that they have the right, the liberty, the resources to do that. Other people will try to define who we are. So self-respect also is a part of self-respect, is also being self-defining, which is really interesting because a lot of what I think about, especially with my background as a community activist and my background in political science, like part of every community, and even in the Black community, part of the sovereignty of a people is that they are self-determining. And self-respect is the only way you can be self-determining. You have to be absolutely clear on what you want, what direction you want to go in, and how you want to show up, so that you can then determine where you want to go, what you want to do, who you want to be in the world. So it's so intricately laced with the absolute highest self and development of the individual leads to the development of communities, which lead to, all the other pieces that we want.
Absolutely. And in thinking about that, just again being reminded that so much of what we're taught is not about self-respect. It's not about us making those choices, right? From like the programming from very early on really teaches us that, it's everything is external. Everything is defined by how people perceive you, the value that they assign to you based on you doing the thing that you've been programmed to do in the way that you've been programmed to do it. So really, we're having to do so much unlearning and so much unpacking of these things. And that to me, so off a little bit, and then I'm going to bring this back around full circle. That to me really brings me back to this concept that Jada Pinkett Smith was talking about, and the video that everybody's been sharing about this self-mastery piece. Mm-hmm. Because it's all a bag. All of these things go in the self-mastery bag. Self-respect, self-love, self-care, self-acceptance, all go in the mastery bag. And I grew up with a variety of Islamic practices. I'll say that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I learned growing up was, that Islam was I, self, Lord, and master. It was about mastering yourself, and it was about having this discipline. But again, that discipline was very external. It was a discipline according to what was seen as being, right and just and equal according to those parameters, not necessarily what worked for me or what aligned for me. And so even those things now, I'm having to unpack all of that and see, well, what of these things that I was taught actually works for me? Mm-hmm. Which of these things is actually something that I want to do, something that I believe in, something that aligns with who I am at my very basic level, like that for me is what's important. And so when I think of this concept of self-respect, I'm like, that's, part of this self-mastery is figuring out what does that look like for me? Mm-hmm. So give me just a second. I'm transitioning again.
Okay. Yeah, no, but one of the things that I did want to say as you were speaking about that in self-mastery, I was thinking about the building of the individual, which leads to the building of the community. And our wonderful guest and future producer, Melanie, talked about that in her story today about how she had a speaking engagement. And one of the things that she said to one of the young women after the speaking engagement was, you need to find your tribe.
Yes.
Find your people, find the older women who can give you guidance and be there to support you when you're feeling a lack of confidence, finding the women who are your peers, who are walking the same paths with you, finding the women that you're going to mentor, like all of that, finding your tribe is built as a part of all of that. And so, again, it just gets me back to self-respect, because I see memes about people and who those people are in your life and how long they're meant to be in your life and how you define your relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is about, the respect that we give ourselves influences how we show up in the world, and that influences who we attract, that influences how those relationships operate. It's so much tied into that we cannot afford to not explore what self-respect means and what it looks like in our lives.
Right. That's such a good point. We can't afford not to explore. So I'm thinking about that in terms of finding your tribe and, how much of it was deliberate and how much of it I just kind of tripped into. And I say that because, like, for example, with you and I, orbiting each other for years, having so many, similar friends and so many similar connections. Like when we started talking about that, we literally could go back 20 years and say, oh, this is what you were doing at that time. I was across the street doing pretty much the same thing. Or like you were leaving the building as I was coming in the building. You know what I'm saying? Those type of interactions. And so for me, it's like, okay, it makes sense that we are here where we are now, because this was part of the process. And so I kind of tripped into that, and it took longer. I think had I known and had I been given some tools to cultivate those things earlier, that may have happened a different way and it may have happened sooner. And I say that because one of my tools of self-respect now is cultivating relationships. Like, so Jada, so again, quoting Auntie Jada, what she said was that relationships are a spiritual endeavor. And what I'm finding, what I'm finding is that I look at all relationships like that, right? Not just the romantic relationships. Mm-hmm. So when I'm talking about relationships, I'm talking about the friendships. I'm talking about the intimate partner relationships, sexual and non-sexual. I'm talking about familial relationships, and for me, cultivating is really one of my boundaries. Like if I don't want to cultivate something with you, if I don't want to grow something with you, I can't really say that you're a friend or we have a relationship. It's very pedestrian. And that's an important defining thing for me. It's important for me to understand that. And then it's important for me to show up that way, show up like I want to grow something, show up like I'm serious about, being in relationship with someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that being really important for me as well. Like, I'm super intentional about my relationships, to the point that I've been told things about myself. But that's one of the things that I definitely learned very early on, about just being super intentional about my relationships. So I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to observe. I'm going to be curious. I'm going to look at how people respond to things. So it very much has been intentional relationship building on my end. And for the most part, that has served me incredibly well. Because those relationships have been sites of growth. That was something that I was really thinking about right before our call. I was thinking about how, within like the relationship that I have with my spouse is one that that definitely has forced me to grow. It's forced me to mature. It's given me space for a lot of self-reflection on how I show up. And I'm really grateful for that. Like, I'm really, really grateful that I have this intimate space that I can share and that I can receive honest feedback. And that's the same thing like with our friendship. Like, it's really been a place for growth. It's really been a place where, we have both faced things that we never thought we would face, and dealt with those things and supported one another with those things and confronted one another about those things. But being able to walk through that. And so that has been incredibly powerful. And when I think about relationships, again, my judgment is that for most people, they're not looking at their relationships with the end in mind, right? So thinking about 7 habits of highly successful people, right? One of the laws is begin with the end in mind. And so like, that's how I've always entered into my relationships and friendships, especially. What is this going to look like? What is this going to grow into? Is there room for growth? Is there room for what I desire to happen? Or is there room for something productive to happen within the space? Oftentimes we don't know what's going to happen, but we can leave space open to allow things to happen. And so, yeah, that's one tool that's definitely served me well, that I definitely think is a major tool of self-respect, because, I grew up, and you probably heard this too, but, when you were kids, your parents always said, oh, birds of a feather flock together. You need to find the people that are like you, or you need to find people to be around that have these qualities so you can, befriend them, or something like that. So, again, when I think about how I show up, it works on the other side too. Just as I am watching people and observing them and seeing how they show up, and if I want to extend a hand to them, other people are watching me. They're watching us. They're watching you. They're saying, "Oh, this is how they operate. Yes, I want to be associated with that. Yes, I want to extend my hand, to have more of that, or whatever." So I think it's very practical, but also we may not think of it in that way. We may not think of all that it pulls out of us in the idea of self-respect and those kind of things.
Didn't have that. Like, I really didn't have friendship tools. I didn't get that. It was something that was very important for me with my children, to make sure that they knew how to cultivate friendships, and that they knew how to pick people that aligned with them and that treated them well, and that they had some understanding of those concepts, because I didn't have that. My father literally was like, you've got a gang of brothers and sisters and cousins, and like, we all grew up together, right? So this wasn't just I had a bunch of cousins. I lived in the house with my siblings, with my cousins, with aunts and uncles. There could be 5 of us, or there could be 15 of us at any given time. And so he was like, if you can't master these dynamics, if you can't get along with your family, then you don't even need to worry about having friends. You don't even need to worry about what's out there. Like, get along with these folks first. And so, if anything taught me about doing internal work, like when I think about it now, and it's so funny, we have these conversations and it brings up this old stuff for me that I'm like, well, I didn't learn that. And in this context, when I think about it, I'm like, but I really did. Because what my dad taught me was, until you deal with what's going on inside, don't try to do any outside stuff. Don't try to get anybody into relationship with you if you haven't perfected this relationship. And so that's a message about our internal work. Being in a relationship with somebody, if I'm not working on self-mastery, is going to be difficult. It's going to bring up all types of complications. There's going to be, issues with communication, because I haven't dealt with, my traumas. And so they may do something and unknowingly trigger me, because I haven't dealt with that. And so I'm going to have, maybe an emotional reaction to that, because I haven't talked about it. I haven't talked to them about it. And then they just, step on a landmine. So again, the internal work. So I didn't grow up having friends, because I had to learn how to be in my family and just deal with my family. So, for me, my adult friendships that I have now, when I look and say, oh, I've had friends for 20 years, I was always so envious of people who were like, oh, we went to elementary school or middle school or high school. One, it was super nomadic. So, I was back and forth between parents and stuff. And so I didn't go to like one elementary school. Like, before I graduated high school, I had been to 30 different schools. So it's hard to formulate relationships, inside that dynamic. So that was also, the people who are closest to you, the people who aren't going anywhere, is your family. No matter where we move, no matter where we go, they're going to be there. So these 20-year relationships that I have, 3-4-year relationships that I have, those are accomplishments for me. Being in a relationship with somebody, for an extended period of time, people who I'm not necessarily married to, you know what I'm saying? For me, that was a big deal, because I just didn't get those. This is how friendship works, and this is how you choose friends, and this is how you decide if these, friends are still if you're able to be a good friend to this person, you know, because as you change, maybe you don't have the capacity to do certain things. Not just is the person a good friend to you. I didn't get all of that. That's stuff that I had to discover as an adult. So again, that goes back to those boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of us aren't taught that, especially, again, if we come from families where friendship isn't a priority. My mom is very much like you. She had 13 brothers and sisters, or 11 brothers and sisters. So it's like, oh, you have plenty of people to talk to
Right.
and communicate with, and you got the same amount of brothers and sisters. So like literally, if you need to talk about guy stuff, you got brothers. If you need to talk about girl stuff, you got sisters. So you're good. um so it definitely impacted, what I saw and what my desire was. But I can say that as I got older, I got clearer and clearer on what I wanted, right? I wanted to be around people who like to do the stuff I wanted to do. Everybody, like when you're 20, 21, you got your first little job, then happy hour becomes the thing. And I don't drink, so I didn't get invited to happy hour. So, I like to go to the bookstore and I like to go to museums. So I had to find friends who actually had those interests and do those things. But again, it was also this matter of my boundaries, right? Because I could have capitulated and said, oh, okay, well, I'll do this thing that you guys want to do because that's what you guys want to do, as opposed to, well, I don't really do that. So I'm going to go over here and do the things that I enjoy doing. So, having that boundary and being able to stand by the things.
Now, can you so did I was
Can you say that again? You're kind of breaking up and a little muffled.
I was becoming really sober drinking because it's very with not drinking, go to meetings addicted to because the cigarette I'll be place whatever else. So being that, there were a lot of times where we don't know what around you and invite you to be drinking. Me saying sobriety is about and about me making where I want to be and what circumstances I relate to people on. And so yeah, there were get invited to places that I had to make that I want to be in certain things or with certain people. Because at that point it was like, no, I can't. I'm doing my work right now, and that looks like I'm not going to be able to, participate. And it was hard because then I started like realizing like, oh, some of these relationships really were just about like these were my party and bullshit friends, which kind of sucks because I thought we had developed some real relationships, and it was like, oh, but only when I'm being fun.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that clarity, right? That clarity that comes with, again, how you show up in the world. So if you're showing up in the world in a certain way, people being okay with that. But if you show up in the world a different way, maybe they're not okay with that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And ultimately it comes down to, am I okay with it? Am I okay with how I'm showing up in the world? Is it authentic or is it performative? Is it internally driven or is it being influenced by what I want to happen with other people in the external world?
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because you said you start things with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say sometimes I've just, tripped into these things because I don't always start with the end in mind.
Yeah, I think that's, again, like I said, that was specifically, a strategy that I learned, from all of my self-help journeys. But yeah, that was really a key for me. It was really a key because, some people already, like if they do this, I'm going to do this and it's going to be on or, it's going to be over or, whatever. So really yeah, taking the long view. I think, taking a long view. And I think that's just something we aren't taught to do at all. I think we live, especially now and when I say now, I mean in 2019, because everything is so instantaneous. Everything is so quickly and easily accessible that waiting or building or looking at things long term is just not even considered. Like
Right.
not it's not even considered. So of course you don't know how to do it because you don't even think about it. It's very much transactional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we call that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of things are so built around transactional relationships, which, excuse me, is great if both people know, hey, this is just a transaction, we're good, right? Um, but for the majority of people, I don't think they're willing to admit that they are engaging in a transaction or that the person who's engaging with them is engaging in a transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We want to feel that we mean something to the person. And so we won't even think about that maybe this is transactional. And the person wants to feel that they're a good person. So they may not even be willing to admit that it's transactional. And then in the end, one person is sitting there with hurt feelings and the other person is sitting there with a bad reputation because there wasn't an agreement on the front end that, oh, this is purely transactional.
Absolutely. And so that again, that goes back to self-respect. And for me, this is really a new endeavor for where I am now. Like this is okay, so this is where I am, this is what I understand, and this is how it works. So it's not that there's been an absence, it's that now I have a different understanding according to what my experience is and where I am. So when I think of that in terms of how it affects how I show up and how it's reflected in how I show up, it very much is about making those agreements and having those conversations. And and for me, we had this discussion last week, for me it's a function of my self-love. Learning to love myself, learning to care for myself,
Mm-hmm.
being dedicated to that practice, right? So back to practice. We're talking about practice.
Yes.
Practice is how you are going to perform, it's how you're going to show up. So me practicing um, what I want, how I want to be treated, me practicing self-respect is a function of my love for myself. Because I love myself, I have respect for myself. Having respect for myself looks like I don't want to enter into relationships where there is not a definite agreement, where we haven't, talked some things out, where we haven't, said, these are my expectations. This is what I'm bringing to the table. You know, uh, these are the things that are absolutely no-nos for me. We don't, a lot of times with friendships, we're just not going in having those discussions. And I just think about how important that is. But because I love myself, I want that. I want to do that. I want to be clear on how I'm showing up. And I want to be clear on the relationships that I'm establishing with people that I choose to show up with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, I'm thinking back to what you said about all relationships because I think, there are a million and one wife schools / wife clubs / pre-wife clubs / future wife clubs / Christian wife club, pages and groups all over social media and in real life, where you have people practicing and learning and preparing for a relationship that may or may not happen, in all honesty. But the reality is you do have to be in relation with your peers, your sisters, your cousins, your neighbors, your family members, people that you may want to actually be your friends. But we get no preparation for that. We get no practice in that. You know, I kind of joke that shyness runs in my genes, because my mother is incredibly introverted, and that has shown up in some of our family members, some of our descendants, and I just had to be really honest, with one of my niece's moms, like, yeah, we're gonna have to do stuff to get her out of her shell because she naturally has a shell. She just naturally has that, and it's okay for her to come out of it at her own pace, but we have to show her how to connect with other people who like the things that she likes, so she doesn't feel left out by the things that are just popular for her age group if she's not things.
Yeah, that's again super important to know those things and to figure those things out. I figured them out more through my children than anything else, and helping them also, like, what is it that you like? What are your interests? How can I support you? What resources can I provide for that? Just interesting how this all comes together now as adults. Like for me, it hasn't been a linear path. So a lot of this stuff is like connecting. This is connecting for me in real time. So if there seems like there's a delay, it's because my brain is literally going,
oh, that's what that was. Oh, that's what this means.
Starting to come together like, oh, okay, so this is how this functions. That goes back to the fact that we're taught a lot of stuff, but it's not necessarily framed for us. It's not, necessarily, oh, this is a function of, financial wellness. It's, pay bills. This is how you pay bills, blah, 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 blah. And, the circumstances, if you don't pay the bill, then you're not going to have the thing, or it's going to get turned off, which is very like fear-based and authoritarian, which I just tend to rebel against anyways. Versus, the influence, right? Being able to understand the relationships between things and how they work together. So now these things, it's like, okay, so now I see, the space on the wheel that fits into and why it's important, and, how these lessons make sense. Now I can reframe them for myself and really be able to use them practically.
Yeah, because you have the skills and you know where they're supposed to be applied now,
right?
As opposed to them being kind of these random ideas and quotes and pithy sayings that people say, right, but you never understand exactly how to apply them or how they apply,
right?
And so for many people, they end up in those transactional relationships, which, is what I was getting at earlier about, we do all this training for this potential relationship with marriage, with wife school. And even that is one-sided because I've never seen husband school. I will say it. I've never seen husband school. I've seen a few guys who like to give relationship advice online. I've even seen a lot of men who talk about parenting and how fatherhood is so important. But I've never seen husband school.
Well, this is also a topic that kind of, comes up for us pretty regularly about where are men doing their work. Like, we've got all of these spaces to do our work and to work this out. We've got chat with the aunties.
Where's chat with the uncles?
Where are the uncles having these conversations? And so that also goes back to this conversation on self-mastery and the people who we're getting into these relationships with. Like, are they doing the same work? Do they have the capacity the emotional intelligence? Like, there are, again, in our community, we can kind of pinpoint who those people are because we are in relationships with them. We're related to them some way. So, but in an overarching sense, no, we don't get that. We don't see the husband clubs and the husband groups and, that conversation happening, or even the men's groups and the brotherhood circles outside of very specific things like, fraternities. That does not really seem to be a part of the culture. So when we talk about things like toxic masculinity or, misogyny and misogynoir, there's really not been a space uh, or many spaces for them to do that same type of work. Now, I'm not saying that I'm volunteering to do that because I'm not a man, so that's not my work to do. I understand though that it creates an imbalance when we're over here doing work and we're over here talking about things and we're over here working on self mastery in a very intentional way, you know, with very specific tools and language that supports that, and then, you know, getting into relationships with people who don't do that. So again, this goes back to practice. What are we practicing? You know, we're practicing with ourselves, we're practicing in our circles with our sisters, with the other aunties, and then we're getting into relationships, even our you know, differently gendered and different sex relationships that are non-sexual intimate relationships are not balanced because they don't have those same type of tools.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, how are people showing up? People are showing up with what they have. And if you don't have it, then, you know, how do we get on the same page? How do we have, you know, real conversations? How do we have sustainable relationships? How do we get out of being transactional?
Yeah, and I'm making this frowny face, which I'm really not trying to make, but I'm thinking about one of my male friends who is incredibly nurturing, incredibly caring, incredibly loving, and I've known him at least 10 years. I'm certain it's more than 10 years because my children are more than 10 years old. So I've known him, I guess, almost 15 or 16 years, if I'm going to be honest. And incredibly nurturing guy. And I'm thinking, like, I'm consciously thinking, like, how did he get that way? Now, what do I remember seeing him do over the last 15 years that has shaped him into this person? And on the one hand, I know it was very much him spending time at the feet of his mother and grandmother.
Mhm.
I know it was very much him having a father who regularly enforced and reinforced respect for women, concern, nurturing and supportiveness. And then I know that he studied intensely. Because we used to do it together. We would be reading all these psychology books and, psychoanalysis books and books on culture and books on community. And he had these very active male mentors who wanted to ensure that he got a specific level of teaching and training about community building and relationship building. And I've seen him enact that in his life as being this nurturing relative to the younger people around him, to my children, even to me, just in all these areas. So what I can offer, because I'm not here to do that work either, is, a lot of studying, sitting at the feet of the women in your life and finding out, and learning about those tools that we have, and also getting around some men who are modeling this. There are men out there who are modeling an ethos of care, an ethos of nurturing, an ethos of support, of love, of emotional intelligence. So it absolutely exists.
Mhm.
There are men out there doing it. And
Yeah.
not that men should do it for husband school, but men should do it just as a part of their own doing of the work. Because
So
for women, it's all about wife school, but the men, not as husband school, but as human school, because there's a
yes.
lot of practice at human school, but for the guys.
Yes. And so that's what I was going to say. Definitely none of this is about, again, because it's not transactional. This is not about becoming
Right.
the best friend or best wife or best husband. This is about just, can you be the best you? Can you, and that looks like being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like, understanding your choices and your drives. Again, this is all about that self mastery. And so I even think about the birds of a feather, right? When I heard birds of a feather, and even when I think of it now, I don't necessarily think of it as finding your tribe. For me, it was a caveat. For me, it was like when people were doing stuff that they didn't have any business doing, like people were falling in with the crowd, the wrong crowd, right? It was, well, birds of a feather. Like that's how I hear it. And so for me, it was, a warning. And I'm thinking about how we do this deliberate work and, falling into the crowd that most aligns with us, right? So this isn't about making you into a best something or better something. This is just about what happens as a result of you being the best version of yourself, because then you start to go places like, so our first interview, this is when I knew it was real. And I was like, and I think I told you this, I was like, so you're basically stuck with me now. I'm not going anywhere. Know that. I'm also that friend. Like, if I know that the friendship is genuine, then I'm going to, put in the work, and I'm going to, do what I need to do, because I'm going to be thinking about how am I showing up, and what can I, what do I need to do to maintain this space, because that's important to me. So I knew when we started talking about stationery. So I asked you to do my Women's Empowerment Wednesdays that I was doing on my Purple Hair and Converse channel. And it was the longest interview that I'd ever done. And even then, we were having technical difficulties. We were like shooting on the
we couldn't get the phone to stand up. We used like the iPad over here and the phone over here.
Traffic outside. It was like crazy stuff happening. I remember like having that conversation, and I realized that it was a result of me being honest and saying, like, I really love pens, and I really love stationery, and I really love books. And so I didn't have to go say, oh, I love all these things every time they just won't let me be great. I didn't have to like, go on a board and be like looking for other friends who like stationery. As a result of me being in places where stationery is sold and where pens are sold, I was able to establish, relationships with people who had similar interests. So I'm distracted now because the dogs are barking. But I said all of that to say, like, you don't have to, you can remove that part of being transactional by just continuing to show up authentically as yourself.
Right. You don't have to be transactional when you are authentic. Exactly.
That right there. Put that on a
write it down.
You have to be transactional when you are authentic.
Yes, got it. I got it. All right. But yeah, I think that's our key piece, right? You don't have to be transactional when you are being authentic. That's the best piece right there. There's no need for it. There's no need for it. You can show up and be who you are.
And I think for me that kind of wraps it up. Like that for me is the centerpiece, like, of everything that we've been talking about in this series. That is the centerpiece, right? Because this series is about honesty. That's where we started out, and then we've gotten all the way over here, and it comes all the way back around to, showing up authentically is an act of honesty. And so when you're being authentic, you don't have to be transactional.
Right, right. When you can show up and be who you are. So I think that's a great point. I think we got our chat. I think we got the nugget that we always get. And, again, it just gets us back to how are we showing up? What choices are we making? Where are we being transactional? Where are we engaged in transactional relationships? And where
Mm.
might we need to restructure or reevaluate those relationships?
All right, so come on then. Give us our journal prompt.
Where are your relationships transactional, or where are you being transactional in your relationships? And what relationships might you need to reevaluate because they are transactional and not authentic?
Okay. So, of course, I'm writing this down.
Of course, we have to have our journal prompts so we can talk about what happened and
Right.
talk to people about what happened.
All right. So, where are you being transactional in your relationships? And what relationships might you need to reevaluate? I am here for it.
Hmm.
All right. Well, we are down to our last few minutes. So, what say we start our wrap up?
Yes. Well, as always, we are incredibly grateful for everyone who joined us live, as well as on YouTube and on Instagram. We are incredibly grateful for you joining us and talking about self respect and how we show up in the world. If you have not, please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and leave a comment about how this episode helped you, what it made you think about, what other ideas it sparked for you. Also, head on over to Instagram, follow us on Make You Media, MAQHUMEDIA. I am the Lux Libra on Instagram, and she is Purple Hair and Converse on Instagram. So we're all on the internet streets. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we would love for you to be there with us. We love talking about these topics, and we cannot wait for you to join in. So we always have the chat box open on YouTube and on our live here. So make sure you join in on the chat with everyone else, as well as a part of chatting with the aunties. Bring your tea.
All right. So, are you working on anything currently? Is there anything, any links that you need to drop where people need to get in touch with you about work? What are you up to?
Sure. So, as you may or may not know, we are both life coaches, and you can check the links in our Instagram bios for life coaching at, again, the Lux Libra, or you can go to my website, theluxlibra.com. Same thing with Malika. She is at Purple Hair and Converse on Instagram, as well as on her website, purplehairandconverse.com. I am also a communications consultant. I'm editing some wonderful novels right now and working on a how-to guide for educators as well. So those will be coming out soon. And I'm finally going to release my ebook, Fearlessly Free. So, Fearlessly Free is coming out in about 2 weeks. It's going to be my birthday gift to myself at the end of September. So, that will be out by the 1st of September. And we've got makeyoumedia.com coming soon. So you can see all of the work that we do together and get more details on Chat with the Aunties and our coaching work, as well as all the other wonderful stuff we've done together over the last, 4 years?
4 years.
So yes, so definitely get all out in the internet streets and look for us. Drop us a DM or comment on our pics, because we always have prompts, journal prompts up on the Make You Media Instagram page and Facebook page, and we monitor that page pretty regularly. So we do respond to comments, we do respond to DMs about the work that we're doing, and if you want to work with us, again, drop us a note on the contact page on either of our websites, or you can DM us on Instagram.
All right. So, once again, Malika Salam, Purple Hair and Converse, do a whole bunch of stuff. I'm a multi hyphenate. I am spending more time with writing, working on educating and getting certified, getting licensed actually. My next couple of years are really focused on getting this mental health counseling license, which just goes, right into the heart of the work that I do, I do women's work. That's what I'm here for, creating safe, sacred, nurturing, nourishing, and healing spaces for all women, meaning women of all ages, specifically focused on making sure that women of color have those spaces, spaces like Chat with the Aunties where we can do this work. So you can catch my writing on Lesbionics, on Maladjusted Media, and of course at purplehairandconverse.com. Pretty much anything that you want to find, you can find in the link in my bio on IG. And my current project, I'm slinging Hope Dealer t-shirts. So go on and get you one of those. Again, link in my bio on my IG. And help me buy pens and pencils and art supplies and stuff that I need to be an effective educator out here. That's what the money's going to. And probably more mugs and t-shirts as well. There are a bunch of people that I want to support and I need funds to support them. So you give me money, I give them money. It's the circle of life and circulating the dollar throughout the community. So that's what I'm doing over here. Um, and that's it. That's our hour. I think we wrapped it up. So hit us up individually. The Lux Libra, Purple Hair and Converse, hit us up uh, on our combined page where we bring together our performance and our power, making media. And we'll be back next Wednesday.
Bye, y'all. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Bye.